forth and so forth. Nick Griffin on Question Time. Did everybody watch that Question Time when Nick Griffin was on there? Yeah? Yeah? That was one of those moments when Question Time was just like everybody was tuned in. What did he say? In one of the comments he said, Islam is evil, okay, is barbaric, and it says that in the Quran. Okay, I'm paraphrasing what he said, not the exact words. All the politicians, not one of them said anything on the panel. As if that was the default position regarding Islam, that is barbaric and is backward. Dr. Rowan Williams, anybody know who he is? Archbishop of Canterbury. He suggested not too long ago that there are some aspects of Sharia which will inevitably be a part of British society over time. So he said, in order to not delay this process, we should allow Muslims in certain areas such as marriage, divorce, inheritance to deal with this according to the Sharia rules. The next day, the Sun published articles. The front page was chopping hands in Britain or something like that, yeah? So they took an aspect of the Islamic punishment system, okay, nothing that this man was talking about, and the front page was Islam for chopping hands and blah, 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 front page headline. So this is one of the reasons why this debate has come to the forefront, and it's important for people to understand it. The mistake that we Muslims make, okay, there's many of you here who may not be Muslim, the mistake that we Muslims make, we don't gain knowledge of our Islam, and we don't interact with people around us who may not be Muslim. So the only view they have of Islam and Sharia is what they see on the TV, what they see in the newspapers. So whatever they hear, it's understandable. If you think Sharia law is about chopping people's hands and chopping people's heads, I would be afraid. I would think, hang on, really? You mean, you guys, if I took a Mars bar, you're going to chop my hand off? Or if I took a drink or something from someone I shouldn't have done, it was a mistake, you're going to chop my hands off, my ligaments off of that? So it's a question which, if people don't really understand what Islam is and what the Sharia is, it's obviously they're going to have reservations about it. So Muslims, even though it's their responsibility to engage with people, unfortunately we don't. The third thing which allows for this type of thinking to settle amongst people's minds is that in the world over today, there is no Islam in its comprehensive form, which I mentioned at the beginning, implemented to be an example so we can turn around to people and say, look, that's a model of what Islam, when it's implemented in its totality, that's what it looks like. That doesn't exist, okay? And maybe in question time we can elaborate if somebody has some questions about Saudi Arabia, Iran, and so forth, yeah? So it doesn't exist. So we can't even put a model up to show to people. And these three factors, they allow this to settle in people's minds, so they start to think, Sharia might be barbaric, Islam may be barbaric. Moving on. The first thing we have to deal with, okay, once we understand what is Islam generally and why this is a discussion, is to answer the question we have to look at who determines what is right and wrong. How do you know that something is acceptable or not, it is right or wrong? To pass a judgment and say something is barbaric, you have to first say that it's something which is bad. So the question we have to ask is who decides and how does one know what is good or what is bad? In Western society, in secular societies, this is done according to man's whims and desires. Every person chooses for himself what is right and wrong, what is good or bad for himself. Therefore, the subject becomes subjective. Let me give an example. NHS, it spends over £60 million on alcohol, okay, abuse. This is not taken into consideration all the vandalism, the money which it costs to take somebody and put him into prison overnight while he's drunk and disorderly. Okay, it doesn't take into consideration the social effects of alcohol. One report once mentioned a survey where wife beating increases due to football games and alcohol. So it doesn't take any of this into consideration. Just people getting drunk, behaving disorderly, and having to go to the hospital and be treated for injuries or whatever, cost the NHS £60 million. Why is it then that the government doesn't ban alcohol if it has such a negative impact upon society? Because the government would lose, okay, money and revenue from the taxes that breweries and alcohol producers generally they provide through imports and exports and what have you. So they will lose this revenue. So they're balancing out between what we make and what we lose, and not the effect upon society. Okay, that's one example. Alcohol on planes, that's the same problem. Everyone's seen something on the news where somebody's got drunk on a plane and he's gone a bit bananas, yeah, and they have to land the plane and get these people off the plane. Now that's a scary thing. When you're like 25, 30,000 feet up in the air and somebody's gone crazy because he's been drinking too much, that's more scary than even thinking about the potential of some bomber being there, right? Which is unlikely, okay, in the current, all the security and everything else. So somebody's drunk and he's doing all these crazy things, okay? Yet, the way that airlines measure this is that, look, we provide an additional service, which is we provide alcohol for our clients, and we have duty-free. And you can buy duty-free and drink. No one's going to stop you. So those two things is what they weigh against. So whether it's a good thing to keep it or not is weighed according to the interests, okay? The benefit and the harm to that particular person or that particular lobby group or that interest group. Fox hunting. You've got some people, okay, animal rights campaigners, they'll say that fox hunting is inhumane, is cruelty. While the farmers will say, no, these rodents, they attack our crops, we're glad they kill. And somebody who lives in the countryside and is a traditionalist, he will argue, no, this is something that we've always done and known. Marijuana, okay, pot, okay, is it something which is good or bad? Some people will argue, look, it's a plant, therefore it should be allowed, it should be legal. Another set of people will argue, no, it should be allowed but only for medicinal purposes. And another group would argue, no, it's not acceptable, it's illegal. It has too many negative effects. So human beings, their opinions are subjective to their likes and dislikes and their interests. So there's no generic, this is good and this is bad, this is barbaric and this is not. The next thing is that human beings, they change their opinions according to different times and circumstances. So for example, 30, 40 years ago in this country, homosexuality was outlawed. Today, no problem. Criticizing the government and certain governments in the Muslim world, for example, or considering the Taliban as a freedom fighters, was considered something not a problem during the 80s. Why? Because at that time, everyone remember the war between Afghanistan and Russia, yeah, that thing happening, and it's been supported by, America, Pakistan, and some other nations. So at that time, to say the Taliban are okay, no problem. Today, if you say Taliban are okay, you're going to get into trouble under the anti-terrorism legislation and the act of glorifying terrorism. So over time, views have changed. And during Tony Blair's government, how many new legislations do you think he introduced? This was some 10 years, right? How many new legislations? Somebody shout out a figure.
400.
How many?
400.
400, no more. More than that. I could carry on, but let's get to the point, yeah? He introduced over 3,000 new pieces of legislation in 10 years. So has human activity changed so much? So many new things have happened that so much new legislation had to be brought in. So you can see that in human beings, when they think, they always measure by what is their interest, their like, and their dislike. So right and wrong is determined by these things. 2 million people came out and protested against the Iraq war. Yet, oil companies who were paying these political parties 10 to 20 million pounds for their campaign funds, they had interests there which were overridden by then 2 million people coming out saying, you know what, this is illegal, this is wrong, this can't be justifiable. So people's likes and dislikes